Howdy, I'm Helgas and welcome to Nostalgic November, the month where I'll be going through old games to see if they stand the test of time, or if it's another game that suffered from the really smudged rose-tinted glasses. Today we're looking at 1986's Castlevainia for the NES. The game spawned a massive series that might even get some new entries soon. Konami, the holder and creator of the Castlevania games, have woken up from its nap. It seems that they started making video games again, which is either going to be a new era for the Contra, Silent Hill, Castlevania, or possibly the Metal Gear series, or it's going to be a repeat of the early 2010s, where Japanese companies were handing out their IPs like candy to Western companies, only for the games to be ungood in most cases, but worse for the companies, and the bigwigs running them, where the games sold horribly compared to their expectations. Enough of our current times, as we're going back to 1986. But before we fully jump in, I'm recording this game through the Castlevania collection on PS4. It's just easier to record for me at the moment, and brings some nice quality of life features, which makes the game a bit more tolerable for me. So let's swing right into the story. Castlevania's story isn't shown in-game, as that trick comes with the sequels. From what I can tell, we're not giving any reason for why we're here, or at least a reason for it happening in-game, as I wouldn't be surprised if that's in the advertising or the manual. So for some context, we're Simon Belmont and we're tasked with killing Dracula. That's the story given in this game. If you want a more in-depth story, go to Super Castlevania 4 since it's a remake of Castlevania 1 and brings more importance to the story. But here we're tasked with going through the castle and killing a bunch of Golden Age horror monsters. So let's start whipping our way through the gameplay. Coming out in 1986, the game has a limited number of things we can do. We can move, attack in 4 directions, and have a jump. A jump that you get to be 100% committed to since you don't have any real air control. This is no Mario, as the moves we are left with can make the experience a bit stiff. Especially when it comes to the platforming, having no air control makes those committed jumps punishing. In most places, the game puts enemies in odd spots where you have to time your jump, because if they hit you, you're going back a good distance, and most of the time into an instant death pit. These elements are all heavily improved on in later games. There are some more mechanics hidden under the wax-covered, forever lit candles. Smashing them gives a good number of goodies, and the drops depend on a small number of factors. The first factor is what level is Simon's whip currently at, as the game starts you off with a basic bitch whip, where the game will prioritize giving out whip upgrades. It can get a total of 3 upgrades, and each upgrade increases the amount of damage and range you hit at. It's like this so that if you die, the game attempts to play catch up, having you at your full power. So whenever you get back to a boss or wherever you were, you're not pumpkin spice basic bitch Simon, but instead vampire killer Simon. It's nice for the game to do, but it also comes at a cost, which is losing out on the other items the game can drop. Now if you're at full power, the game will drop other things, but the most common ones are these hearts, which increases the amount of usage you get when picking up a special item. Special items also come from candles, which can be in the form of these daggers, which are the worst item, as you can throw a lot of these since they don't use too many hearts. The trade-off is you're literally pinching the enemy to death. The axe is a weapon I know to exist but I barely get, which is thrown in an arc and deals a decent amount of damage. The boomerang / cross, you throw it and it goes forward then back to you. The stopwatch pauses all the enemies except for bosses, but it's the most expensive item to use. Finally, holy water, which you throw on the ground and it deals damage over time. Obtaining one of these isn't entirely random, as there's guaranteed drops of certain items on stages. The candles are a simple thing for players to grasp, and I do enjoy them quite a bit. Now one thing I don't like is the secret spots for items. These range from hitting a certain block to get some help, to walk to an end piece of a block, then crouch for a few seconds for an item to pop out of nowhere for some extra points. Now the only secret I knew without looking it up is at the end of the first stage, walk up to this wall and hit it. This will drop chicken for more health, and that's because it's one of those iconic secrets. Hitting blocks for health I'm fine with, but doing the whole crouch thing for items is a frustrating element. It's just an unnecessary feature that's a relic from a different era of games. But making dumb secrets like this could help give additional coverage for the game, through gaming guides or getting a segment in magazines like Nintendo Power or something. It's a feature that just hasn't aged well in my opinion. The hidden health also isn't much of a problem at the start of the game, as the first 3 stages are great since they have a great mixture of combat and platforming. The enemies aren't too hard in the beginning stages, which is a nice change since this is the NES era, where games tend to be out to fucking get you for no reason. Now the hardest enemies in these stages for me is the Medusa head. It comes down to my goddamn monkey brain unable to comprehend the simple pattern they're running in, while the bosses are straightforward of hit boss and stunlock them. The hardest bosses in these early stages is the mummies who attack in pairs. The easiest method I found dealing with them is to stand in the corner, crouch, and whip. That whip keeps the mummies at bay, making them an easy affair. But once we hit stage 4, it feels like somehow I just insulted the designers of the game, to the point where they send the digital version of the Yakuza after me, because on stage 4, the designers really like to use this frog? Now, I don't know if it's racist for me to say, but fuck them dumbass, stupid-ass, frog-looking asses. They're an enemy type that's annoying to deal with, since if you stay too close, they hop from space to tackle your ass. Stay back and they will Usain Bolt their way to bite at your ankles. Fuck these frogs, man, there hasn't been a time where I wish I was French until now, since they get a natural plus 10% damage against frogs. The worst part is the devs had to know that this enemy type was annoying, since we get a stage where they litter these fuckers everywhere. Then they made the goddamn boss of the area Frankenstein with its damn friend, Mary Shelley the psychotic frog, and she goes fucking sicko mode throughout this fight, which made this fight a lot harder and more annoying than it had to be. Especially since they thought to make Mary invincible, which made this like be pure luck on how I beat it. I still don't really know what I did to win, but at least Mary can go back to the fucking grave. After the game attempted to commit first-degree digital murder, the designers must have realized this is a video game, so it's toned back to an enjoyable level that doesn't feel like cheap bullshit. It's another fun stage with some axe-throwing goons, only for me to walk to the death fight, where I stopped at the game because I don't know what to do against this man. Now trust me, I gave it a good college try, which means different things to different people. Message down in the comments if you dropped out of college so that my analogy is either great or if I'm wasting my breath. The fight breaks down to me trying to dodge everything, where I kept dying. I saw that I could break his scythe, so I had a new plan of attack. Then Death himself decides to fucking Goomba stomp the shit out of me. He deals a lethal amount of damage, which makes sense since he's Death, but after killing me an enormous amount of time, I decided to look up what to do, only to find people to say farm candles for some holy water. I tried, but I couldn't find any, which made me call quits on the game. The worst part is, I know that I'm close to the end of the game, I just can't truck through it. The second half of the game screams of being the first game in a franchise, where the game tends to be in its roughest state. Since the devs don't really know what works yet, they're just willing to throw random shit at the wall to see what sticks. Well, we can see that happening in so many franchises, of the odd ideas the first games of a franchise have. Here it has a great foundation, it just needs some tweaking for this to be truly a classic masterpiece. But with its problems, the game stumbles hard to get anywhere close to the masterpiece status. Let's switch gears and talk about the graphics department. Releasing on the NES means the game utilizes pixel art. At the time of its release, it looks great and on par with what Nintendo was doing at the time. Now the game does have a lot of flickering in moments, which stops us from seeing the sprites in their full glory, which is a shame since all the monster designs are similar to older monsters. From the ghosts to the fish people that remind me of the creature from the Black Lagoon, to probably man's oldest threat, a fucking dog, especially depending on the breed. The only thing that sticks out, and it isn't even a creature, it's the basic blocks we walk on. I wish there was more detail put on them so that they feel, like bricks, but I'm going to assume that these designs were done with the limited power of the NES. Most of the sprites have aged well, but there are a few that haven't been too kind throughout the years. For me, the worst offenders is the big Medusa head, and the skulls laying around in one area. They don't look bad, they're just rough around the edges compared to everything else, which is all I can say about the graphics. Moving on to sounds, Castlevainia was released in the era where all the musics and sounds were done with bleeps and bloops. Even with these limitations, the game still brings decent sound design, as killing enemies has a satisfying sound that I just don't know how to describe. When you come across an enemy that you get to hit in a certain area, it has a sound for no damage hits. It's this dinking sort of noise where if you hit an enemy, it's telling you you're not doing damage. While there might not be too many noises going on at once, the game does have a fantastic soundtrack for each area. The only complaint I have with the music is that there's only one boss song for all the bosses, which makes them all blend together, which is a shame. But the worst noise in the game happens at the end of each level, as it will add the remaining hearts, time, and life into your score to get extra lives. To do this, they decided to use this horrible high-pitched sound for each terrible point, but alas, that was part of the time, so cool! I love having my ears bleed. Which brings us to my final thoughts on Castlevainia. Castlevainia is an alright game with a lot of rough edges. It surprised me to see that this game is what spawned such an iconic series, especially since Konami didn't know what to do with the next game in the series, as the next game is a story RPG versus an action game. Even though the first in the series, I really don't think the game has held up to time, as the game sits at a solid 6 out of 10 for me. The game is a blast in the beginning stages, only for it to devolve in the second half. At that point, the game is just out for blood. Even if that was improved, it wouldn't do much better since the gameplay is a bit too basic. Plus, you could start the series off with better games, like Super Castlevania 4. It's a remake of Castlevania 1 with more moves, better controls, a massive visual upgrade, plus an actual story. Next time, we're going to jump a few console generations and tackle the PS1 classic Jumping Flash. Until then, have a fantastic day.